Recreational drugs are undoubtedly an international problem that very few countries, and unfortunately we'd have to include New Zealand here, are making any headway with.
It's prompted a bunch of US celebrities to turn the just saying no philosophy on its head. They reckon maybe saying yes could be a much smarter idea.
They think locking up users in the war on drugs isn't achieving much at all. Here's Craig Stanaway.
Celebrities and drugs aren't usually the best mix.
I am on a drug, it's called Charlie Sheen.
This week, though, the likes of Kim Kardashian, Will Smith, Scarlett Johansson and Richard Branson, amongst others, have harnessed their power for good, or evil, depending on how you see things. They've asked President Obama to rethink the so-called war on drugs and stop locking up so many people for minor drug offences. Here in New Zealand, calls for softer drug laws have a habit of falling on deaf ears.
There's not a single solitary chance that as long as I'm the Minister of Justice, we'll be relaxing drug laws in New Zealand.
But the ball does seem to be rolling, albeit fairly slowly. Portugal's drug abuse rates have halved since decriminalising all personal use in 2001. 2 American states have legalised some cannabis use. Others are set to follow, and New Zealand is leading the way with its approach to regulating legal highs like this.
It's really about giving an assurance to the users, to their parents in many cases, and to the wider community that the products that are available are safe.
So we're regulating synthetic cannabis, but maintaining a hard line against the real stuff.
80% of crimes are alcohol and drug related. So if the police target dealers in particular, then that's going to have an impact on the overall crime statistics. With
half of all adult New Zealanders having puffed the herb at some point, and minor drug convictions costing us around $60 million a year, it's likely the call for change is only going to get louder.
But there is an organisation in the US called LEAP. It stands for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. It wants to go a lot further.
Yeah, they say drugs need to be legalised and regulated. I spoke to the Vice Chair of LEAP, Peter Christ, and asked him how doing that would in any way help the drug problem.
Legalizing drugs is not about solving the drug problem. Legalizing drugs is about shutting down the underground marketplace that the terrorists and gangsters are financing themselves off of. And dealing with the drug problem is an educational and a healthcare problem, and stop creating an underground marketplace for this. We tried this with alcohol between 1920 and 1933. And we found out that alcohol did not create people like Al Capone. Prohibition of alcohol is what created people like Al Capone. And in 1933, we decided to legalize alcohol. That didn't solve our drinking problem, but it put a big dent in our crime and violence problem. What we have to do is get the gangsters, thugs, and terrorists out of this industry, deal with this as a healthcare and an educational problem, and move on.
Critics, though, say if you take away the illegality of drugs, that's going to turn would-be drug users into rampant drug users.
First off, I want to say that anybody who isn't using drugs in your society or our society today is not using those drugs because they can't get them. I'm sure drugs are just as available in every city in New Zealand as they are in every city in America. And the fear that everybody will become a drug addict was exactly the fear that people tried to sell us when they said that we shouldn't legalize alcohol in the early 1930s. They said everybody will become a drunk and it'll destroy society. And that's exactly what happened. We legalized alcohol and everybody became a drunk and we lost World War II and we're all speaking. Of course that didn't happen. What happened is people responsibly use this drug. Some people don't use it at all. Some people use it recklessly and irresponsibly, but the vast majority of the people that use alcohol use it responsibly.
So what you're saying is this is about turning drugs into a case of supply and demand?
When you're talking about consensual adult behavior, when you're talking about things that consenting adults want to do with each other. I want to sell you drugs, you want to buy my drugs. When you make that behavior illegal in a society, you create crime. And if there is money connected to that activity in society, then you also create violence. And we are saying at LEAP that we are not about the drugs. Don't use any of them. They're all terrible. be as drug-free as you can be, but to use prohibition to deal with this drug problem is contrary to what we're trying to accomplish.
Now, we've touched on, obviously, drugs and alcohol. What about cigarettes? Some people say just banning cigarettes would end that problem altogether.
We, in the last 10 years, have gotten 50% of the adult cigarette smokers to give up smoking cigarettes. And how do we do that? Well, we went around and we burned all the tobacco fields, or we locked up all the tobacco sellers. No, that ain't what we did. What we did was we educated the people, and we made it a little bit less convenient to smoke. You know, you got to go outside, you can't sit in the bar and smoke anymore. And 50% of our adult cigarette smokers have given up tobacco. We haven't had that success rate with any illegal drug anywhere.
Yeah, he talks really well and he's quite convincing.
Very.
And we brought this up on Facebook today, and well, it's really controversial, right? People have got a lot to say on this particular issue. Let me throw this one at you, Greg, because you know his arguments probably better than we do. Tennille says that the thought of legalising pee makes her shudder, and you would get that, right, with all the crime and violence that pee causes.
Absolutely.
How could we do it?
But the point Peter made right at the beginning is if you get rid of the people who are making pee now, who across the board are criminals because it's illegal, and you make it regulated and you decriminalise it, you take that element away from it, you're going to make it, you know, you're not going to see the people who are making money out of it. It's going to be regulated. But you also, like he said, you're not going to see the whole world go, oh, pee, it's legal, I'll give it a try. It's just, he made a really good point, which we weren't able to use in the interview, but about the prisons in America. 4.5 or thereabouts, 4,500 prisons in America, 2.2 million inmates, not one of them is drug-free. And his point is, if you can't make that environment drug-free, which is so locked down, you're just not going to do it out in the wider society.
Some of the most secure prisons in the world.
Absolutely.
Stephen Wroughton says legalising all drugs will increase the rate of use and abuse because it's more readily available, and therefore everybody will try it, or sends the message to the drug users.
Understand what he's saying.
I don't understand. No, I don't understand.
No.
Well, Peter was saying, like, no one is not taking drugs because they're illegal, but I think there'd be people who would be more likely to give them a try if they weren't illegal.
I think at the harder end of things, like we're talking about, you know, heroin, pee, cocaine, no one's going to go, oh, I've always wanted to give it a bash. I don't think...
But when my daughter turns 18, she says, well, am I going to try cannabis? Well, the government says it's OK.
But no, but that's the point he made as well.
Earlier than that, Jesse, just
No,
saying.
but as he said right at the beginning, we're not saying drugs are good, drugs are bad, but there needs to be education, they are bad, like cigarettes. People give up because they know they're bad and it's out.
And in Craig Stanaway's story that we ran right at the top, you will have heard of the example of Portugal. It is, once they took the criminality away from cannabis, they were able to use education and health care issues.
Exactly.
Well, it feels wrong to me, but you've heard the arguments. We want to hear if you're convinced. We're asking, do you think New Zealand should legalise all drugs, like Peter Christ was suggesting? You can vote at 7sharp.co.nz on Facebook, or you can text us. Just text A or B. Just text the letters to 8875, and we'll bring you the results a little bit later on in the show.
Welcome back. Let's have a look now at the results of our poll we launched earlier. We're asking, do you think New Zealand should legalise all drugs? 66% of you, through a fug of cannabis, have said yes. 34%. No, that's interesting. This, of course, on the back of the LEAP interview we did before with the group in America. So
he made a very good argument.
He made a very strong argument.
Maybe a particular special interest group were answering that poll more than others. And if so, well-motivated cannabis team.